Well, good evening, everyone. So nice to be here, and so nice to have you here at Upaya. I do keep coming back, but they also keep inviting me back. So what can I say? I guess it's working out. It's working out well. Tonight, I want to talk about a particular teaching called the Shinshin Ming, or the mind of absolute trust, or faith in mind, or faith in trust. I mean, there are a number of translations. Who here has read it or has some familiarity with it? That's because you gave a talk on it 5 years ago, Manshin. Yeah, thank you. All right, so not too many people. All right. The first thing I'd like to do is invite you just to maybe close your eyes. I'm going to read it. It's a little bit long. And I would invite you also to listen to this with your heart as opposed to discursive mind, okay? The mind of absolute trust. The great way isn't difficult for those who are unattached to their preferences. Let go of longing and aversion, and everything will be perfectly clear. When you cling to a hairbreadth of distinction, heaven and earth are set apart. If you want to realize the truth, don't be for or against. The struggle between good and evil is the primal disease of the mind. Not grasping the deeper meaning, you just trouble your mind's serenity. As vast as infinite space, it is perfect and lacks nothing. But because you select and reject, you can't perceive its true nature. Don't get entangled in the world. Don't lose yourself in emptiness. Be at peace in the oneness of things, and all errors will disappear by themselves. If you don't live the Tao, you fall into assertion or denial. Asserting that the world is real, you are blind to its deeper reality. Denying that the world is real, you are blind to the selflessness of all things. The more you think about these matters, the farther you are from the truth. Step aside from all thinking, and there is nowhere you can't go. Returning to the root, you find the meaning. Chasing appearances, you lose their source. At the moment of profound insight, you transcend both appearance and emptiness. Don't keep searching for the truth. Just let go of your opinions. For the mind in harmony with the Tao, all selfishness disappears. With not even a trace of self-doubt, you can trust the universe completely. All at once you are free, with nothing left to hold on to. All is empty, brilliant, perfect in its own being. In the world of things as they are, there is no self, no non-self. If you want to describe its essence, the best you can say is not two. In this not two, nothing is separate and nothing in the world is excluded. The enlightened of all times and places have entered into this truth. In it, there is no gain or loss. One instant is 10,000 years. There is no here, no there. Infinity is right before your eyes. The tiny is as large as the vast when objective boundaries have vanished. The vast is as small as the tiny when you don't have external limits. Being is an aspect of non-being. Non-being is no different from being. Until you understand this truth, you won't see anything clearly. One is all are one. When you realize this, what reason for holiness or wisdom? The mind of absolute trust is beyond all thought, all striving, is perfectly at peace, for in it there is no yesterday, no today, and no tomorrow. So just take a moment to get a sensation of how this poem lands on you. And I'd be interested in hearing just a few words from a couple of people. Just a word or two, not not even complete sentences. What kind of feeling, reaction do you have after hearing that poem?
Complete.
Complete? Mm-hmm.
Relief.
Sorry?
Relief.
Relief, yeah. Mm-hmm. Freedom, yeah, yeah. I love the feel of this poem. And I'm going to beg your patience and your indulgence here because whole books and whole practice periods have been shaped around taking this poem apart. There's so much here that I can only point to some of the most important pieces in a short Dharma talk. So this poem was written perhaps by somebody named Seng Kang, who perhaps lived from 526 to 606. We don't cling too much to these, the veracity of facts and figures, but rather does the content feel and prove true in our lives. But it was written at a time in China. In fact, Maizumi Roshi, the founder of this lineage, Roshi's grandfather, I guess is how it would go, called this the first Zen poem. It was not written using Sanskrit or Pali. It was written in contemporary Chinese. And this was a time when Zen, Indian Buddhism was coming to China, and it was meeting with Confucianism, with the Chinese culture, and with Taoism, right? And so it took on a whole new form, and it became this. For a period of time, this wonderful experience of spontaneity and all the mashup of that Taoism brings, which we'll talk about in a moment. But these words that you have, a couple of words that have come back, are exactly the point why the author wrote this poem. He wanted to convey what it is like to live in the world with ease, with a sense of completeness, with a sense of freedom, with a sense of relief, right? And Zen has been around and Buddhism has been around for a very, very long time under many different types of external circumstances and conditions. And we don't just practice when the times are good or find the truth in the Dharma when everything is perfect, but we look to these sorts of teachings that point the way to cultivating an internal landscape, heart and mind, that allow us to live even with peace and ease, even when the external circumstances are difficult and challenging. Perhaps you might imagine such a time. So we do live in a very complex, fragmented time of poly crisis. And yet, what I think this poem is inviting us to do is to not forfeit our ease, our stability, our serenity, just because the external circumstances are so challenging, right? It isn't to deny those challenges, but rather it is also not to live into our worst catastrophic thinking, right? And how do we do this? I'm going to go through some of the poem line by line to bring out some of the key teachings and explain how I think they are doing it, how we can do this. The Shinshin Ming actually is a word that can mean faith, trust, and it can also mean mind. So this is where we get the title Faith in Mind. And the version that I am reading from and read is by a translation by Robert Olson. And what is at the heart of this poem is one of the key things is just paying more attention to how our own preferences chop up our lives and create suffering. I will tell you that there are many, many translations of this poem. This is the one that I prefer. So right away, exercise and preference. It can also be called, let's see if I can find this. Doesn't matter. Okay. So the first lines, the great way isn't difficult for those who are unattached to their preferences. So the first thing that I want to point to is this use of the word way, right? That way, and this is very much a indication that Indian Buddhism has connected now with the Taoism of China, right? Because way is such an important concept in Taoism. And this refers, the way that the Taoists referred to it and used way, it was being in harmony with the natural order of things, the fundamental principle that governs all existence. It's not about having a rigid set of rules to follow, but rather through a very natural process, aligning ourselves with life on life's terms. As Suzuki Roshi used to say, the founder of my lineage and Chuck's and Manshin's, things just as they is, which is so hard for me to say because it's grammatically so incorrect. I have a preference. There it is again. But for aligning ourselves with the way that the world is, which doesn't mean that we roll over and play dead. It doesn't mean that we just assume that it's going to be this way and that anything that particularly is out of alignment deeply with our values, that we don't immediately surrender to that, but rather we look at our preferences and we figure out what is the most skillful way to go forward under the circumstances. These lines are alternately translated just to give you a slight feeling for the way different translations can go. Attaining the way is not difficult, just avoid picking and choosing. The great way is not difficult, just have no preferences. The great way is effortless for those who live in choiceless awareness. I mean, it sounds really relaxing, right? Into a nice hot tub or something like that. But we know how difficult it is. We know how difficult working with our preferences can be. There's this other aspect of the way that I want to bring forward, which is so interesting here, Wu Wei, which is effortless action from a Taoist perspective. It's acting in accordance with this natural flow of the universe, avoiding unnecessary effort or overthinking. It's instead turning over to trust and trusting by one's intuition and one's wisdom. One can navigate life with greater skill, greater ease, and greater authenticity. And the thing that I like about the Taoist notion of the way is that everything is the way. And it's not like we have to go out finding the way, right? I don't have to go out and put my foot down on it. The way is everywhere, and the way is going to come up right underneath my feet and support me in this process. So the great way isn't difficult for those who are unattached to their preferences. I like this line because some of the translations say the great way isn't difficult for those who have preferences. And I find that very difficult. As a mere human being, to be totally devoid and purified of preferences is a hard thing to do, right? We have these preferences that range the continuum from minor, like, boy, I really prefer vanilla to chocolate, which for anyone's reference here in the future, should you be buying me ice cream, I do. And yet, even though that's minor, what do I do if I'm served chocolate? How do I act, right? Do I get immediately stuck in the situation and cause myself suffering? Do I cause somebody else suffering because I have a preference for vanilla? A number of years ago, I was visiting a cousin I hadn't seen in a long time, and she didn't know that I was a vegetarian at the time. And she made this wonderful, wonderful meal of like a crown roast, and then some beautiful potatoes and a salad. And I did not eat the roast because of my preference. And she had gone to this great effort to make this roast. And I have never regretted that, stopped regretting that in the sense of all the effort that she made to that. That was what was unfolding, that was on the way. But because of my preference, I made a choice. And I knew that it immediately made her feel uncomfortable. Oh, but I wanted this to be a perfect meal. I wanted to welcome you again after such a long time. The skillful thing to do, I now know, 15 whatever years later, would have been to just sit down and eat the crown roast, right? Exactly, yeah. Or to find a skillful way of maybe explaining it better. At any rate, so it isn't that we don't have these preferences, but rather that we're unattached to whether or not they become manifest, right? And we try to do this again with great skill. And the continuum of preferences can be anything as simple as the flavor of ice cream that you prefer to the type of political environment you want to live in. How do we live? Do we forfeit our ease, our peace, and our happiness because of our preferences? Again, I don't want to be at all confusing in my words. It is not that we forfeit our values. It is all a question of how we then work with the fact that our preferences are not coming forward the way that we want them to. Well, there's another aspect of this too, which is that sometimes what we prefer isn't always the best thing, right? Or we don't even know what is happening is if it doesn't have the possibility of coming out somewhere completely different from our preference. And is that okay? So right now in these times, there's a lot of anxiety, depression, concern, all churned up, right? But we're still we don't know. We're still in process. Could it be when our minds are really clogged with our preferences, there's no room for other possibilities. There's no room to see anything else, any other way that this might go. Could this be that, thinking about Saturday, could this be that there is an uprising and a renewed interest and a sense of taking responsibility in our governance structure and our governance process as opposed to turning it over to people? Could it be that more people will actually truly realize the impact of climate crisis and come to the fore and actually start doing things locally on a state level as it gets more intense? We don't know. We don't know what could happen. So part of our practicing with preference is not only realizing that we have a certain dog in the fight in terms of the ideology, but maybe even beyond our own ideas, there's a possibility. And this is called don't know mind. And don't know mind is something that is extremely spacious. Preferences are very narrowing. They're very limiting, right? But don't know mind is very big and very vast, and it allows not only for possibilities that we can't imagine, but it also allows us to rest in the spaciousness of don't know mind. This is one of the reasons why we sit zazen, why we meditate, to give ourselves a chance to have our very tight, busy monkey minds relax and drop away, and actually cultivate a more spacious experience where all of our thoughts can just come and go without our clinging and grasping onto them. No right or wrong, just, oh, there's the idea. I prefer chocolate. Oh, I prefer, a secure democracy, things like that, right? So spaciousness, but we forfeit this spaciousness, right? We forfeit it. And I invite you to think like I think, how quickly I forfeit that spaciousness, that sense of well-being when I give over to a preference, when preference takes me over. So the next line is, let go of longing and aversion, and everything will be perfectly clear. Let go of longing and aversion. Reminiscent of anything to any of the residents? Okay, I'm not going to put you on the spot. Too much. Second noble truth, right? First, that there is suffering, and then causes of suffering. And the causes of suffering are that we cling or we avert, we push away. I want to hold this tightly. I never want it to end. I don't want this at all. When will it end, right? So let go of longing and aversion. Let go of that way of just constantly being buffeted around by clinging and aversion. Find something neutral to stand up in, and everything will be perfectly clear. These, our clinging and our aversion are just like a cloud cover that we just put over whatever it is that is our experience, our ideas, some sort of oppressive, humid cloud cover. And we can't see clearly through that cloud cover. It not only obstructs our experience, our vision, our understanding, but usually it also bumps us out into separateness, a feeling of separateness when we are in a form of a posture of clinging or aversion. So the next line is, when you cling to a hairbreadth of distinction, heaven and earth are set apart. So from this, both Taoism as well as from Zen and Buddhism, we're operating from a understanding of fundamental oneness, of no separation. It doesn't mean that I'm not separate and individual, independent from you or you from me, but that's just one understanding of how the world operates. In a moment, the section that was, talking about not two, not two. This is the teaching of the two truths. And in this teaching of the two truths, what it is inviting us to understand and then to experience in our own lifetimes, in our own bodies, is the fact that there is the relative phenomenal world that's happening all the time. This is separate from me in a way, right? If I walk in front of a car, bad things will happen, right? But that is just one reality. Happening at the same time is a sense of oneness, what we call the absolute or the ultimate, where all things are interconnected, where there is no separation. Interbeing, as Thich Nhat Hanh called it, right? Another way of understanding it is co-creation. We're just always in this rubbing up against each other, against other experiences, co-creating the experience of our lives. So when we are only operating out of this relative small I-based living, then everything is separate. It's kind of like we're taking I'm about to date myself, heads up, Vegematic. Some people. Okay. We chop our life into lots of tiny little pieces because with our preferences, with our opinions, with our thoughts. And in the relative world, that can work and it can even be useful. But simultaneously, we are existing even in this moment in the absolute, in something that is so much bigger, so much more spacious than just the relative. We spend most of our time just in the relative. For me, my image of this has always been that we're like people who feel like we're drowning and dying of thirst while we're in the relative, just at the same time, the waters of the absolute are right here up at our chin level, and we could drink endlessly out of the absolute. There are times when we can experience this more easily. We do this this is why we do Zazen, to put ourselves in the way of having these glimpses into the absolute. And as I think I've said before, but it bears saying again, those glimpses are really important and they're not to be minimized, because paying attention to a glimpse and then the next glimpse builds, and it creates more capacity to actually access the absolute and to embody it in our lives. So when you cling to a hair's breadth of distinction, heaven and earth are set apart. If we only live in the relative world, this is kind of a dry place to live. When we're clinging or we're averting in our heart minds, we're separating the inherent unity of this moment. And our preferences come down like a cleaver into the moment, and just with all the kind of that brutality, that harshness that a cleaver can bring, come down in that moment and can separate us from peace and ease and well-being. You might think of, if you have any members of a family group or close friends who disagree with you about the current political situation, and if you start having a conversation or the conversation turns that way, it truly can feel like a cleaver coming down, right? And all of a sudden, it's not just, people being together, experiencing something in a way that might be undergirded by an experience of oneness, but boom, it's separated and we're knocked out of that experience. And it's a fundamental source of suffering, right? When this happens, because it feels so bad to be that separate. And it feels so bad to really cling, like it's sharp. It's like holding on to razor blades, to cling to our preferences and to cling to our opinions. Senko, remind me how much time I have, because I'm like about 2 sentences in. 15 minutes. Well, right, we're going to put it into fifth gear. If you want to realize the truth, don't be for or against. The struggle between good and evil is the primal disease of the mind. And this is where preferences take us. Our preference is good, your preference is bad. My opinion is right, yours is wrong. Chocolate is terrible, vanilla is absolutely great. Why would anybody want to eat chocolate, right? And so this is, this being for or against is seeing constantly through the lens of duality and just assessing everything in life that way. And it has a really jagged way of feeling to it, right? Good, bad, right, wrong, up, down, as opposed to taking that overlay of preference and opinions off of the top of the experience and just being in it. And I will say, and I think we all know this, that it's hard work to let go of our preferences. They've been inculcated in us and reinforced, for decades. And so this is not easy work, but I think it is important work. And I think it's really important work right now when we're feeling so much division, not just in our country, but in the world, right? And among people who are neighbors or we would like to be friends with or used to be friends, to have this very pronounced perspective of dualism, of right or wrong, of preferring our way versus the other ways, is very, very harsh, and it's not the solution to how we're going to get out of this at all, right? We have to be willing to be able to perceive where somebody else might come from. What might have gone into the cultivation, the making of their particular preferences, and how we might be able to work together through this. Not grasping the deeper meaning, you just trouble your mind's serenity. As vast as infinite space is perfect and lacks nothing. But because you select and reject, you can't perceive its true nature. So in this moment, we are all simultaneously being part of and being held by this absolute, this oneness. But it is our, overlaying, projecting our preferences, excuse me, on top of this, which takes us out of oneness, right? Don't get entangled in the world. Don't lose yourself in emptiness. Be at peace in the oneness of things, and all errors will disappear by themselves. Don't get entangled in the world. Don't lose yourself in emptiness. This is Buddha's fundamental initial epiphany, which is the middle way. Don't live in this palace that's full of, materialism and having your every need at your fingertips. But wait a second, don't also live just on one grain of rice. Those seem to be opposing. You don't need to go to such extremes. The middle way is the path to follow in all of this in terms of finding this peace and this ease. I'm going to skip ahead to another point that I feel is kind of key beyond preferences. And that is this understanding of the two truths, which I just talked about. And the verse here was, in the world of things as they are, there is no self, no non-self. If you want to describe its essence, the best you can say is not two. In this not two, nothing is separate and nothing in the world is excluded. So again, this is the idea that the relative world, which we are most familiar with, right, which we operate in, the relative world where we go shopping, get our grocery list successfully completed, and we drive, successfully from one part of town to the other, and we get tons of things done, and we do our jobs, where the relative world and the absolute world are not separate. And this again, pointing back to Zazen and other forms that can take us into a sense of oneness. I think nature can do this. I think love can do this as well, where we feel that inherent unity. That if you want to describe its essence, the best you can say is that it's not two. It's not one or the other. So you might think of an embrace. One person, another person. Wait a second, they're not one and they're not two, right? Or we do in our lineage, we do this gesture, which is a gesture of gasho, or thank you. And here is one hand, second hand, but when they come together, they're not one and they're also not two. Right? Our cosmic mudra is another example, one hand, second hand, not one, not two, right? This is one of the physical ways I find it helpful to understand how these things are coexisting simultaneously. So when we get to the end of the poem, it is, the enlightened of all times and places have entered into this truth. In it there is no gain or loss. One instant is 10,000 years. Wuman says, one of our great Zen masters says, one instant is eternity. Eternity is the now, right? So the absolute is beyond time. It is absolutely beyond linear time, and the present and the past and the future all coexist in this way of experiencing and perceiving the world. The mind of absolute trust is beyond all thought, all striving, is perfectly at peace, for in it there is no yesterday, no tomorrow, no today. And again, if everything is the now, then our use of words like today, tomorrow, yesterday are just descriptions of something that exists all the time. Again, just an overlay on a oneness of experience of time. But we say this segment is yesterday, this segment is today, this segment is tomorrow. But underneath it, it's all just ultimately now. So this type of practice, as I mentioned, is not necessarily easy to do because we're so inured, or are so we almost can't even notice what we think is a preference. Often we think it's just a good idea. And we can't even pull it out as a separate thing that's an overlay on our experience. It can be very, very, very subtle. So it is hard work, but with awareness, which is, at the core of Buddhism, to cultivate awareness as to how our mind thinks. This is the path to freedom, to realize when what we are really thinking is nothing but a preference, and that we actually have a choice, or that our preference is causing us suffering. I wish I had perfect health. I wish I weren't 72. All these sorts of things. These are overlays that cause us our suffering, as opposed to just being here in the now. But this trust that we're trying to cultivate is not a blind trust. It's predicated upon the basic aspect, the basic technology of our practice, which is to take the teachings of Buddhism and of Zen and to verify them for yourself. That's how we get trust. Does this make any sense to you? Does impermanence, do you notice it in your life or not? Let me know if you don't and how that is working. Suffering. Is suffering in your life? Have you been able to transform suffering? No separation, this idea of oneness. Do you see it? Do you feel it in your lives? This is how we verify this practice. And this is how we cultivate trust in our practice, in the mind and heart of Zen or Buddhist practice. It's not outside, it's not dogmatic, it's not because somebody sitting in a brown robe is sitting in front of you all telling you this is so. It's because in each of your individual lives, you have verified it yourself. I love that about Zen. I love that about Buddhism. Being raised in the particular religion that I was raised in, it was like, believe this wholesale. I love the freedom that comes with this. I love the agency, but with it also comes the responsibility to do it, right? So we cultivate this trust. As I said, Buddhism is not dogmatic, and we get to see if this really makes sense in our lives and if it enhances our lives. And then it becomes trust that is, again, not blind, but it's trust that where we utilize it to attune to all the circumstances of our lives. As Wuman said when asked, what is the teaching of a lifetime, when he was an old master? He said, an appropriate response. Whatever is going on, good, bad, or ugly, fairly small or really large scale, we get to go through this process and we get to find out what that appropriate response is, no matter what. And that's another thing I'm not here really trying to be a Zen booster, but I do love it, so I can't help myself. That's another thing that I think is so wonderful about Zen, is that I get to discern these situations myself, and I get to choose what I think under those circumstances to the best of my understanding, while being in harmony with my deep vow to commit no harm, is going to be the best action, right? And that's a lot of freedom. That right there is a lot of liberation. The Buddha taught that the only way not to be assailed by past and future was to mindfully live present moment to present moment in your life without attachment to the outcome of your actions. Living in this manner is to trust the eternal now, and that is the one trust that matters the most. So this ease that we can have, that I think this poem actually does energetically convey, is one that's predicated on trust, and it allows us to cultivate equanimity, this equanimity, this stability, with that trust, to know that no matter what happens, we're going to stand up and we're not going to exercise our preference per se. We're going to exercise what we think is the most skillful and appropriate response to whatever is in that particular moment, whatever it holds. And that's what we do. I have no control or extraordinarily little control over what happens to me in my life, but I have complete control over how I respond to it. That is our freedom, and that is our liberation. To live in this realization is to be without anxiety about non-perfection. May we all have that. And then to quote another set of translators, Dunn and Jordan, to live in trust in the non-dual mind is to move with true freedom, to live without anxiety upon the great way. So this is what we do in our practice to cultivate the skills, the understanding, the wisdom, the insight to see how our preferences, our opinions, our cherished, beloved opinions are limiting our understanding of what is happening in a circumstance, what could happen in a circumstance, how they're separating us from, and then as we loosen that chokehold, we can actually enter into the flow of life with peace and with ease, confidence, and serenity. Thank you.